my girlfriend would agree. Our fourth speaker, I guess if you're a fourth speaker, it means you're the headliner, right? That means you're the headlining act. You may be doing something when telling your story that turns your audience off. And if you're not aware you are doing this, you will continue to turn your audience off without knowing why this happens. Our next speaker has struggled with storytelling for many years, made many mistakes in telling stories, and only recently found out an important secret to successful storytelling and audience connection. Today you will learn what TMV is. Discover why TMV is a big problem in storytelling, and find out how to avoid TMV when telling your stories. You will walk out of this meeting today with a tool to terrific talking. And now please join me in welcoming our headliner, Tim Wilson. Tim's speech is entitled TMV. Do you have TMV? Maybe you have TMV and you don't know it. Maybe your friends have TMV. Do your speeches have TMV? How about your stories? Do your stories have TMV? The longest time, my stories had TMV. I didn't even know it. I thought that's the way it was supposed to be. That's the way it's supposed to happen. TMV is just normal. It's what you do when you develop characters. You have TMV. That's the way it works. And I blame the Vocal Variety Project in Toastmasters. Because vocal variety is a good thing. Problem comes with your characters. Sometimes vocal variety can get out of hand. Get a little bit too much, a little bit too big. You can have too much
vocal variety.
Thank you, Jason. Nailed it. TMV, too much vocal variety. Have you ever heard a speech with TMV for the characters? You heard that before? You've given one before? For humorous effect, no doubt, Jason. Yeah? No. Well, I had TMV for a long time. And the more I started listening to my speeches and the way they were done, the way that they worked, it reminded me of a little storyline I did when I was a kid. Maybe you did this yourself. It's a little story. And there are three characters in this story. It's about a villain, who's a landlord, and a heroine, a young woman. And the problem is that the young woman can't pay the rent, and the villain wants her to pay the rent. And at the end, the hero steps in and saves the day. Maybe you've heard this story before. If not, it goes something like this.
You must pay the rent.
But I can't pay the rent.
You must pay the rent.
But I can't pay the rent.
You must pay the rent.
I'll pay the rent.
My hero.
This was a hit when I was a kid. We do this back and forth all the time. And we didn't do it because it was great vocal variety. We didn't do it because I liked to interchange back and forth between the speakers. We didn't do it because we thought it was really an interesting dynamic about how the different layers were getting in there and how the complexities added up. No! We did it because it sounded really, really stupid. And for years, when I did those characters, people would always say, you know, put a little more vocal variety. You got to tell which one is which. And so when I had a woman character, she'd say, "Hi, I'm the woman character." And if I had somebody who's doing bad things like, "Oh, I'm the villain, I'm the mean guy," and the hero comes along and says, "Hello, I'm the hero here. Hey." And I started realizing I was doing must pay the rent, can't pay the rent in my characters, in my stories. You ever had a story like that? Sounded like that? You're trying to imitate somebody and just really, really, really didn't work? Either I'm the only one, which it could be, or you're just bashful. It's all right. No worries. Well, I did this for years, and I give credit to Ed Tate, world champion speaker, for saving me from this problem. Because Ed Tate's a great speaker, and he's wonderful characters in his stories. And the thing about them is that you can easily tell which person is which. But if he has a big person in his story, a big guy, who's that? Who's the big guy? Well, when the big guy talks, he doesn't talk like,
Hey, I'm the big guy. I'm the gunner right here. Big guy, man.
he doesn't talk like that. Instead, the big guy sounds a lot like Ed Tate. And when Ed Tate talks, he talks like Ed Tate too. See, instead of doing the rent vocal variety, the TMV, Ed Tate is rent-free vocal variety. None of that must get or pay the rent, can't pay the rent kind of stuff. Ed Tate does, he just uses a soft switch to switch between characters. Now you people who were here last time know what the soft switch is. People who don't, check out the video, it's online, you'll find out all about the soft switch. Use the soft switch to switch between characters, and then you don't have to sound silly up there. You can use rent-free vocal variety. Your characters will be more dynamic, more interesting, more believable. And they'll connect better with your audience. For years, I went into the whole must pay the rent, can't pay the rent when I was creating my characters. And it just didn't work. The character was silly, the audience wasn't really engaged, it wasn't really interesting, it didn't pull people in. Now, thanks to Ed Tate, use rent-free vocal variety. And if you do this in your characters, instead of thinking of silly sounds, silly ways to do things, just be natural. Use a soft switch back and forth, as we saw Alicia do very nicely. Everything will work, your stories go better and smoother. And so, when we're doing evaluations, it's quite common, a comment after my evaluation meeting said, Tim, you ought to put more vocal variety in your characters. And now I say, why? I mean, you could tell which person was which. Yeah, but there should be more vocal variety. Why? Don't just put in vocal variety for the sake of vocal variety. That's TMV. That's going to get you that whole must pay the rent, can't pay the rent thing. You don't want to go there. Use rent-free vocal variety. Your characters will thank you. Your stories will thank you. And believe me, your audience will thank you. Next time, I talk about the importance of not over-researching your topic.
That was the 8 text in our meeting. Tim, the rest of it is all downhill now. Now is the part where everyone gets to tear apart the speakers. In the evaluations, I'm just kidding again. Our first speaker tonight was Alicia with the speech First Things First. And to evaluate Alicia is JK.
Fellow Toastmasters, honored guests, and specifically Alicia, thanks so much for sharing your story tonight and refreshing us with some Stephen Covey. I'd like to focus on the 3 areas that you asked me to look for. The first would be your level of sincerity and conviction. The second was your focus on the audience and your use of you versus me. And the third area you asked me to pay attention to is your use of transition words. In terms of your tone, I felt 3